a vehicle born from Cold War fear, not comfort. The M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle was not created as a symbol of American pride. It was created as a solution to a terrifying military reality. During the Cold War, U.S. commanders understood that if war erupted in Europe, it would not look like World War II. It would be faster, more mechanized, more lethal, and filled with anti-tank weapons capable of destroying older armored vehicles in seconds. The Soviet Union fielded massive armored forces. Their doctrine relied on speed and overwhelming numbers. NATO expected that any conflict would involve armored breakthroughs, artillery storms, and chemical warfare threats. In that environment, infantry could not survive riding in soft-skinned trucks. They needed armor. But armor alone was not enough. They also needed speed, reconnaissance capability, and firepower. That is where the Bradley came in. The Bradley was designed to transport infantry directly into combat while also fighting alongside tanks. It was meant to be the bridge between the tank and the foot soldier, not just a taxi, but a battlefield partner. And while it is often discussed in terms of its cannon, missiles, and armor, the real story of the Bradley is the story of the men who lived inside it. Crews who spent weeks in heat, dust, and fear. Infantrymen who trusted its steel walls with their lives. Commanders who relied on it for reconnaissance. And soldiers who discovered that modern war is not about heroic charges, but about survival inside a metal box under enemy fire. The Bradley's design philosophy: speed, firepower, and infantry protection. The M2 Bradley was designed around a clear mission: deliver infantry fast, protect them from battlefield threats, and give them the ability to fight immediately. Unlike older armored personnel carriers, which primarily transported troops, the Bradley was designed as an infantry fighting vehicle. That meant it was expected to fight. Its key advantage was that it combined transport and offensive capability in one platform. It carried a crew of 3, commander, gunner, and driver. It also carried a squad of infantry in the rear compartment. The Bradley's layout reflected a brutal truth. Modern battlefields punish slow movement. Infantry cannot walk safely under artillery and machine gun fire for long distances. They must be delivered close to the objective. The Bradley made that possible. But the machine was also built for reconnaissance. Its optics, sensors, and mobility allowed it to scout ahead of tank formations, identify enemy positions, and report back quickly. In many ways, the Bradley was designed not just to move soldiers, but to keep them alive long enough to complete the mission. Technical power that shaped its reputation. The Bradley became famous because it could do what many vehicles could not. It could move fast, carry infantry, and still kill enemy armor. Its main gun was a 25mm chain gun, capable of firing rapidly at infantry positions, light vehicles, and even low-flying aircraft in some circumstances. It was deadly against trucks, armored personnel carriers, and enemy troops behind cover. But the weapon that made the Bradley feared was its anti-tank missile system. The Bradley carried TOW missiles, which allowed it to destroy enemy tanks at long range. This meant a Bradley could ambush armor and survive, even without being a tank itself. It also carried a coaxial machine gun for close defense. Its armor was designed to resist small arms fire and artillery fragments, and later versions improved protection significantly. However, the Bradley was never invincible. Modern anti-tank weapons could destroy it. Mines and improvised explosive devices could tear it apart. Yet compared to unarmored transport, it gave soldiers something priceless: a fighting chance. Inside the Bradley, the human experience of steel and fear. From the outside, the Bradley looks like a powerful machine. From the inside, it feels like a sealed metal world. Infantrymen inside the troop compartment were packed tightly with gear. Weapons, ammunition, body armor, radios, water supplies, and survival equipment filled every space. The air was often heavy with fuel smell, sweat, and dust. During long missions, soldiers became exhausted inside the vehicle. The noise of the engine and tracks never stopped. Communication was difficult. Vibrations shook the body constantly. And in combat, the Bradley became something else entirely. When rounds hit the armor, soldiers could hear the impact like a hammer striking metal. The The crew knew the difference between small arms and heavy weapons instantly. A rifle round hitting the hull was sharp but survivable. An RPG strike sounded like an explosion. A mine blast felt like the world flipped upside down. In those moments, the Bradley was not just a transport. It became a shelter, and also a trap. If the vehicle was disabled in enemy territory, infantry might be forced to escape through hatches while under fire. If fire spread inside, survival became a race against seconds. Bradley crews lived with a specific psychological burden. They were driving into the danger first. Infantry could dismount and spread out, but the vehicle crew remained inside a large target that the enemy wanted to destroy. The Bradley's first true test, the Gulf War. The Bradley earned its battlefield reputation during the 1991 Gulf War. The U.S. and coalition forces faced the Iraqi army, which was equipped with Soviet-designed tanks and armored vehicles. Many people expected tank battles to dominate. But what shocked the world was how effective the Bradley became as a tank killer. Bradleys used their TOW missiles to destroy Iraqi armored vehicles at distances that often prevented the enemy from even firing back effectively. In open desert terrain, long-range optics and missiles became decisive. Bradley crews reported that the battlefield felt like hunting. They identified targets through optics, coordinated with other vehicles, and struck quickly. But this was not a clean war for the men inside. Sandstorms reduced visibility. Vehicles became coated in dust. Engines suffered. Crews stayed awake for long hours. The desert created a strange atmosphere. Endless flat land, burning heat during the day, freezing cold at night, and constant tension because the enemy could appear as silhouettes far away. In many cases, Bradleys were faster than tanks, meaning they could reach objectives quickly and support infantry movements without delay. The Gulf War proved that the Bradley was not a weak support vehicle. It was a serious combat machine. Friendly fire and the brutal reality of modern combat. The Gulf War also revealed one of the darkest realities of mechanized warfare: friendly fire. In fast-moving desert combat, with long-range weapons and limited visibility, American forces sometimes mistakenly engaged their own vehicles. Several Bradleys were hit by U.S. fire due to misidentification. This created trauma that remained with many soldiers long after the war ended. Because being hit by the enemy is one thing. Being hit by your own side is another kind of psychological damage. Bradley crews learned that identification was life or death. A split-second mistake could kill friends. This led to improvements in training, communication, and battlefield identification systems. But the human cost remained. Survivors of friendly fire incidents often described the feeling as betrayal, even when they rationally understood it was an accident. The Bradley story is not only about victories. It is also about the chaos of war, where technology is powerful but imperfect, and human beings still make fatal errors under stress. Iraq and Afghanistan, the Bradley in urban warfare. If the Gulf War made the Bradley famous, Iraq and Afghanistan tested its endurance. These wars were not open desert battles between armored divisions. They were insurgency wars, full of ambushes, IEDs, RPG attacks, and urban combat. The Bradley became both protection and target. In cities, narrow streets limited movement. Buildings created ambush points. Enemy fighters could strike from rooftops, windows, and alleyways. Bradley crews learned to move carefully, often using infantry to clear areas ahead. IEDs became the greatest threat. A mine blast could rip apart tracks, disable the vehicle, or kill soldiers inside. The Bradley's armor was upgraded over time, but no armor is perfect. Still, many soldiers credit the Bradley with saving their lives. There are countless accounts of Bradleys surviving RPG hits, taking damage, and still getting troops out alive. In these wars, the Bradley became less of a fast offensive vehicle and more of a rolling shield. It carried soldiers through streets where a single hidden explosive could end everything. The crew's burden, living in the machine. A Bradley crew was not just a driver and gunner. They were a team bound by survival. The driver had to maintain control over rough terrain, through dust, darkness, and chaos. He had to maneuver under fire, reverse quickly, avoid obstacles, and keep the vehicle moving because stopping often meant death. The gunner was responsible for identifying threats and engaging targets accurately. He had to remain calm while the vehicle shook and explosions erupted nearby. The commander carried the heaviest mental load. He coordinated with other units, made decisions, communicated with infantry, and kept situational awareness. Inside a Bradley, mistakes were punished instantly. A wrong turn could lead into an ambush. A missed target could allow an RPG team to strike. A delayed order could trap infantry in the open. This created a unique kind of stress that infantry outside sometimes did not fully understand. Bradley crews lived with constant responsibility. Their decisions affected not only themselves, but the soldiers riding behind them. The infantry's perspective: a steel home and a steel coffin. For infantrymen, the Bradley was both comfort and fear. It protected them from sniper fire and shrapnel. It allowed them to move quickly across dangerous zones. It provided heavy fire support. But it also carried a terrifying truth. If the Bradley was hit badly, everyone inside could die together. Infantrymen sitting in the troop compartment often felt helpless. They could not see clearly outside. They could not control the vehicle. They could only wait and trust the crew. Some soldiers described the feeling as riding inside a giant target. Others described it as riding inside a moving fortress. Both were true. The Bradley gave infantry something rare in modern war: mobility under protection. But it also concentrated risk. When a vehicle takes a direct hit, casualties can be severe. The Bradley as a recon vehicle. Eyes before the storm. One of the Bradley's most important roles was reconnaissance. Modern warfare depends on information. Knowing where the enemy is can decide victory before the first shot is fired. Bradleys often moved ahead of larger forces to scout routes, identify enemy positions, and detect ambushes. In this role, the Bradley became a hunter. Crews used optics to scan distant ridgelines, villages, and road intersections. They watched for movement, heat signatures, suspicious objects, or signs of enemy presence. Recon missions required patience and discipline. The crew might sit still for hours, engine off, listening. They might move slowly through dangerous terrain, knowing that one mine could end everything. The Bradley's speed allowed it to retreat quickly, but retreat is not always possible. If an enemy anti-tank team gets the first shot, even the Bradley's armor may not save the crew. This made recon missions psychologically brutal. They were quiet, tense, and filled with invisible danger. The Bradley's achievements: a vehicle that changed infantry warfare. The Bradley proved that infantry fighting vehicles could be more than transport. It became a platform that allowed infantry to fight with armored support at the same pace as tanks. It gave American forces flexibility. It allowed rapid assaults, fast repositioning, and strong defensive firepower. Its missile system made it capable of destroying tanks, something older troop carriers could not do. This changed battlefield doctrine. Instead of relying only on tanks to destroy enemy armor, the U.S. Army could use Bradleys as anti-tank hunters as well. This made American mechanized units far more lethal than many opponents expected. The real legacy: the men who trusted their lives to it. The true legacy of the M2 Bradley is not its gun or missiles. It is the human experience connected to it. A young driver in Iraq gripping the controls while scanning the road for buried explosives. A gunner staring through optics for hours, waiting for a threat that could appear in seconds. A commander making decisions under pressure, knowing his mistakes could kill an entire squad. Infantrymen sitting in the back, silent, checking their weapons, hearing the engine roar, and wondering if they will be alive in the next 10 minutes. The Bradley became famous because it was effective, but it became respected because it carried soldiers through the most dangerous parts of war. It was not perfect. It could be destroyed. It could burn. It could be disabled. But for thousands of soldiers, it meant protection, speed, and firepower when they needed it most. And in modern war, that is often the difference between completing the mission and never coming home. The Bradley's controversial birth: politics, doubt, and the cost of innovation. Before the Bradley became respected, It was one of the most criticized armored vehicle programs in U.S. military history. The development process was long, expensive, and filled with arguments between engineers, politicians, and Army leadership. The main conflict was simple. The Army wanted a vehicle that could do too many things at once. It needed to carry infantry, fight enemy vehicles, survive artillery fragments, move at tank speed, operate with modern electronics, and still remain affordable for mass production. Every new requirement added weight, complexity, and cost. This created years of redesigns. Some critics argued the vehicle was becoming too heavy to remain truly mobile. Others argued it was not armored enough to survive modern anti-tank weapons. Many believed it was trying to be a tank and a troop carrier at the same time, and would fail at both. This controversy became famous in military circles because it represented a classic problem. Modern war demands advanced technology, but advanced technology is expensive and politically difficult to deliver. The Bradley's eventual success on the battlefield did not erase its troubled beginnings, but it proved an important lesson. A vehicle can be born in doubt and still become essential once war tests it. The cavalry fighting vehicle variant. The Bradley as a hunter, not a bus. One of the most important but less discussed aspects of the Bradley story is the M3 Bradley cavalry fighting vehicle. While the M2 was built mainly to transport infantry squads, the M3 was designed for armored cavalry reconnaissance. The M3 carried fewer infantrymen, but it carried more ammunition and equipment for scouting missions. It became a vehicle meant to observe, identify, and destroy enemy forces before they could strike friendly units. This variant shaped how the Bradley was used in real combat. In many operations, Bradleys were not just supporting infantry. They were acting as the spearhead, moving ahead of tanks, scanning for threats, and engaging targets before the enemy could react. This recon role was extremely dangerous because it required moving into uncertain territory. A cavalry Bradley crew was often the first to meet the enemy, meaning they absorbed the first shock of battle. For these crews, the Bradley was not transport. It was a predator vehicle, fast, lethal, and constantly exposed. Desert Storm lessons. How the Bradley destroyed more than it was supposed to. The Gulf War revealed something that surprised even U.S. commanders. Bradleys destroyed a significant number of enemy armored vehicles, including Iraqi tanks and armored personnel carriers. This was not supposed to be their main role. Tanks were expected to dominate armored kills. But the Bradley's TOW missiles and optics allowed it to engage effectively at long distances, often before Iraqi crews could even identify where the shot came from. Many Bradley gunners described the experience as clinical and terrifying at the same time. They were firing at silhouettes far away, watching explosions through optics, and realizing they were killing crews they could not even see. This is an important psychological detail. Killing from distance does not remove the human weight. Many soldiers later admitted that after the adrenaline faded, the reality hit them hard. They were not just destroying vehicles, they were ending lives inside them. The Bradley became famous for its effectiveness, but its crews carried the emotional burden of what that effectiveness meant. Thermal optics and night fighting, owning the darkness. One of the Bradley's greatest advantages in modern warfare was its ability to fight at night. Its thermal imaging systems and optics gave American crews the ability to see heat signatures in darkness, smoke, and partial concealment. In Desert Storm, this became a decisive advantage. Iraqi forces often lacked comparable night fighting capability. Bradley crews could detect enemy vehicles and infantry positions while remaining unseen. They could move through darkness like hunters, striking targets that could not properly respond. But this also created a unique kind of stress. Night combat is disorienting. Crews see the world through screens and optics, not through natural vision. The battlefield becomes a set of glowing shapes and moving shadows. A mistake in identification could kill civilians, friendly forces, or non-combatants. The commander had to constantly balance aggression with restraint, knowing that one wrong decision could create tragedy. The Bradley's technology gave power, but it also gave responsibility. The Bradley versus mines and IEDs, a war of invisible explosions. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the Bradley faced a threat it was never originally designed for: widespread improvised explosive devices. A traditional battlefield threat is visible: tanks, artillery, machine guns. But IED warfare is psychological terror. The enemy does not fight you directly. He hides and waits. Bradley crews began to fear roads more than firefights. They watched for disturbed dirt, unusual trash piles, abandoned vehicles, and suspicious wires. They learned to read the environment like detectives. When an IED detonated, the result could be catastrophic. Tracks could be ripped apart. Crew compartments could fill with smoke. Infantry could be thrown against steel walls with bone-breaking force. Even when the vehicle survived, the crew often suffered concussions, hearing damage, and long-term trauma. Some soldiers described the Bradley as both a protector and a magnet. It could absorb blasts better than lighter vehicles, but its size and importance made it a preferred target. This was not a war of honor. It was a war of hidden explosives, and the Bradley became the frontline victim of that reality. Urban combat. The Bradley in the streets of Iraq. In cities like Baghdad and Fallujah, the Bradley fought in environments that were fundamentally hostile to armored vehicles. Urban warfare restricts movement. Streets become narrow channels. Buildings create blind corners. Rooftops become firing positions. Enemy fighters can strike from above, behind, or from hidden basements. Bradley crews learned that their biggest enemy in cities was not always the rocket itself, but the inability to see it coming. A single RPG team could fire and disappear within seconds. The Bradley's 25mm cannon became extremely valuable in urban combat because it could suppress enemy positions quickly, destroy barricades, and provide cover for infantry movement. But the psychological pressure was intense. Crews knew that every intersection could hide a deadly ambush. Every parked car could contain explosives. Every building could conceal a shooter. Infantry depended on the Bradley for fire support, but the Bradley depended on infantry for survival. This created a mutual bond. The machine could not dominate the city alone. It needed soldiers outside, clearing rooms, watching rooftops, guiding it through danger. Maintenance and fatigue. The battle behind the battle. A major part of the Bradley story is not combat, but exhaustion. Modern armored vehicles require constant maintenance. Tracks wear down. Engines overheat, electronics fail, dust destroys filters, heat damages wiring. Bradley crews and mechanics worked relentlessly to keep vehicles operational. This is often forgotten by people who only see combat footage. The real war includes long nights repairing track systems, replacing parts under floodlights, and sleeping only a few hours before the next mission. Many crews formed a deep respect for their mechanics because they understood a simple truth. If the Bradley breaks down during a mission, the crew may die. A broken engine is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence if the vehicle becomes immobile in hostile territory. This created a culture of discipline. Crews learned to check everything: fluids, ammunition, optics, radio systems. They treated maintenance like ritual because ritual meant survival. The Bradley's human legacy, trauma, brotherhood, and the weight of returning home. The Bradley's story does not end when the mission ends. It follows the men who served inside it long after the war is over. Many veterans describe the Bradley as a second home, a steel space where they lived, ate, slept, and fought. The smell of fuel and metal stayed in their memories. The sound of the engine became a permanent echo in their minds. Some soldiers returned home physically unharmed but psychologically damaged. They remembered the sudden explosion of an IED. They remembered the panic of smoke inside the compartment. They remembered dragging wounded friends out of burning vehicles. They remembered the silence after combat, when the vehicle finally stopped moving and the reality of what happened became unavoidable. But they also remembered brotherhood. Inside a Bradley, men trusted each other completely. A driver trusted his commander's orders. Infantry trusted the gunner's accuracy. The crew trusted that everyone would do their job under pressure. That bond is what made the Bradley more than a machine. It became a moving symbol of modern mechanized war. Powerful, fast, lethal, and always carrying human lives inside it. And that is why the M2 Bradley remains one of the most important infantry fighting vehicles ever built. Not because it was perfect, but because thousands of soldiers fought, survived, and sometimes died inside it, turning steel and tracks into a living chapter of military history.